welcome along to the September edition of the Landlord Lens. This is the second instalment of the collaboration between Property Tribes and the National Residential Landlords Association, and I am again, of course, joined by NRLA CEO Ben Beadle. So before we get going, just a quick recap of the format. We want to create up-to-date content addressing the issues that are affecting landlords, and boy, there are plenty of those. So we're going to take a shallow dive onto a couple of topics that we have picked up from the trending topics silo on Property Tribes. And this is the little silo that curates the topics that are of most interest to the community. So we have a little algorithm in the background that sees how many people are looking at it, how many people are commenting, how many people are liking, how many people are sharing, and then it creates this silo, and that silo resets every 3 hours or so. So it's very good barometer of what is on landlords' minds, what's engaging them. And then for the second half of the webinar, we're going to take a deeper dive into a topic that we really want to focus our landlord lens on. And no surprises that this week it will, of course, be once again what's happening with evictions and you know, the length of time it's going to take landlords to get a court hearing, etc. And we've got lots of updates for you on that. But first of all, Ben, well, it was only last month that we were talking, and so much has happened in that past month. In my 18 years of being a landlord, I don't think I've ever experienced such velocity of change in the sector.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Vanessa. And you know, even today, you know, there's lots of debates and discussions going on in Parliament and the House of Lords around the eviction ban. It's hugely difficult for landlords to keep up with the various changes, but keep up we must, because the only thing that is certain is change.
Well, indeed, and that brings me nicely to our first shallow dive topic, which is property education. And I'm sure every single person on this call will agree that authentic education in how to be a compliant landlord is absolutely vital, no doubt about it. But I wanted to get Ben's views on this because Ben, we know there are various different channels that people can go down for education. And, you know, if you're on the starting blocks as a newcomer landlord, and in fact, only this week we've heard that there's been an 18% increase in landlords that are searching for first-timer landlord mortgage products, which just, you know, does suggest there's a lot of newcomer landlords interested in getting into the sector. When you're on those starting blocks, you have a choice of, there's two kind of educational streams. If you turn right, you go into what I would call industry stakeholder education, which is education provided by such bodies as the NRLA, ALA, TDS have some very good training courses, quite a few out there. But then if you turn the other way, you go into what I call the wealth creation sector, which is where you go into a kind of marketing funnel of one of these wealth creation gurus that say you can be a millionaire in a year with no money. And I think it's very important for newcomer landlords to understand there's very radical difference between the two different information and kind of, you know, educational streams there.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and it's an area that I think is a really challenging area, because as a newbie landlord, you know, you probably want to set out to do everything right. The thing about the sort of wealth generation training that exists out there, I'm sure it has its place, but you know, I think you have to make sure that you know what you're going into before you enter into any form of training. Now, if somebody's going to be charging you several £1000s and it's got some very whizzy marketing around how you're going to make your millions, you might want to do a fair bit of due diligence before you enter into that, because frankly, you know, there are lots of people that have gone down that road, and I think I'm sure some have found it useful, but some, as we will talk about later, no doubt, have have not found it useful. I think a good barometer for me is looking at the nature of the training provider, and whether it's for profit or not for profit is a really good starting point. A lot of the ALA, TDS, and ourselves are all operate on a not for profit membership basis, and our training is available to non-members should you not be a member of NRLA. But this isn't about bigging up the NRLA training. People will make their choice and go with what suits them. But if you are a new landlord, we've got a great landlord fundamentals course that gives you an overview of being a landlord. That's 82 quid. It's not going to pay for my retirement, but question whether or not you need to pay out a lot of money for training, but also what you want to get from it as well.
Absolutely, and we do have quite a few trending topics of this nature on Property Tribes this week. I'll draw your attention to a couple of them. There's a joint venture that has gone very badly wrong with a property trainer called Steve Colley, where a lady has lost quite a significant sum of money. She's not alone in that. Then we have the upcoming bankruptcy hearing of property trainer Glenn Armstrong. That's looking to be somewhere in the region of 4.6 million, something along those lines, of money that he owes people, including mentees that lent him money. But also, I think that the main one that we've been seeing gaining traction on Property Tribes and across the entire property social web, whether that be Facebook or Landlord Zone or other forums, is Touchstone Education refusing to refund a severely ill mentee the £13,000 she paid for their training. Now, this lady has two illnesses beginning with C, one of them which is COVID-19, and Touchstone are refusing to refund her, even though they received a doctor's letter literally pleading with them for a refund to assist this lady during a very challenging time in her life. They have point blank refused. And I'd be interested to know, Ben, what is your view on this refusal to refund a severely ill student?
Well, I think it's a very regrettable situation to be in, and I understand it's quite a significant amount of money. £13,000. With any business, you enter into T's and C's and you sign a contract, but having seen the comments and various viewpoints around this particular individual, it does seem to me that a more appropriate solution might be to wish the lady better and to give her money back.
No, definitely, and that's really what the entire property community is saying. And I think it's worth highlighting this particular case because I think it shows that there's very little routes of redress when this type of wealth creation training doesn't deliver, or if it goes wrong, or if there's an issue. It really is totally unregulated. There are virtually no routes of redress, and that's why so often it does appear on social media, because that literally is the only voice that these people have.
Totally agree. And also, 13k is a huge amount of money for training. Makes me think I should review the pricing of the NRLA training, to be honest with you. But I would be really interested to know what the return on that 13k is. Having seen a few of these types of events, it will be interesting to see how the wealth creation industry does in an era of webinars and virtual training, where frankly there's less whipping up of energy in a room that may well make people make an impulsive purchase. I cannot conceivably think of you pay out 13 grand, how are you going to become a millionaire, or some such a spin on it. Whatever you do, make sure you know what you're investing in. I'm sure it's for some people, I'm sure it's not for others, but it's not for me.
No, quite. And I think also this particular lady had been off sick for 6 months. She was having tests, she was having hospital appointments, she couldn't work, and you know, it's going to be very hard for somebody in that position to kind of really make anything work. You know, we have to wonder of, you know, why did Touchstone Education then recommend that she get a bounce back loan? I couldn't think of worse advice to encourage a very sick person to get into further debt, even if she could have got one. I don't know if she could, but that was part of their advice and suggestion. Along, you know, also, as I mentioned, they wanted access to her full NHS medical records, which I do believe is a gross invasion of somebody's privacy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, whatever the rights and wrongs of somebody withdrawing from a course, you know, sometimes as a business owner, you know, you need to step back and think, is it fair that I keep somebody's money, notwithstanding the absolutely dreadful situation that the individual finds herself in? And I think it's an interesting indicator, I think, for others who are thinking of going down that line. Is this a business that does the right thing, despite what's perhaps written in a contract? It doesn't sound like it to me.
No, I think the whole sort of topic of training is interesting, because when I've been along to these wealth creation events, as you say, they do whip people up into a frenzy. They create a very emotional high in the room. And I think that's a big part of getting people to sign up and, you know, commit to these huge and very significant sums of money, some of which are 20, 30, 50,000 pounds, which could actually be a deposit on a buy-to-let property. You know, I think they're all about, you know, you're going to buy a £40,000 house in Blackpool and get a 27% yield. And what I've noticed you know, common across most of these wealth creation educators is they never mention the word tenant. And, you know, your tenant is your customer. Without one, you won't have a business. And not to mention that buying a property takes, I don't know, 3 or 4 months from research to completion. Then you're going to be in a, you know, commercial relationship with that property and the tenants residing in it for maybe 20 or 25 years. So I do feel that a very large emphasis of property training should be on tenant and, you know, property management. And I think that's another area where the industry stakeholder courses diverge away from the wealth creation sector training.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I've invested in, as you know, I am a landlord, and when I set out to invest, I didn't fork out shed loads of money for somebody to tell me where or the types of properties that I should invest in. Actually, what I did was I did my homework around the particular areas that I had worked in and had frequented. Did my background on the markets and the availability of tenants, and that's the way that I did it. And I strategically took the view that I wanted to have the properties that I bought within a reasonable distance of where I lived, so that I could, you know, this was a fanciful view looking back. I'm crap at DIY and fixing things, but the idea was that, you know, I'd be able to go and change the light bulbs and do the ad hoc stuff. I'm so useless, I have to rely on others to do that now. But, you know, if I do need to get to the property, it's within a short proximity. The bit that I think where training can be really, really useful is some of the soft skills around managing your tenants, but also around the legal side of things of, you know, how do you set up a tenancy? What do you need and what does it look like? And how do you actually have a successful tenancy? How do you select your tenants? What references do you take up? Tangible skills that will really help you in your day-to-day property management. And I think that's where, again, you know, this isn't bigging up the NRLA stuff at all. Make your choice on training, but some of the industry bodies will be a safer bet than an unregulated market that has responded in a disappointing way to a customer that's in need.
Absolutely. And we'll just finish on this topic now by saying that the NRLA Academy has both in-person training, moving obviously more towards the webinar side of things. You've got a fundamentals course, and you've got quite a wide range of courses for people at different levels, or people are looking at different strategies.
Absolutely, and the point for me around the NRLA is making sure that landlords have access to competitively priced training that are genuinely going to help them with their lettings businesses, but also to make sure that they keep the right side of the law. They can be accredited, really differentiate between other landlords, and we see that as being a really important part of the NRLA in terms of the professionalisation of landlords and improving the image of landlords as well. So have a look if you're interested.
Yes, we can put a link to that underneath this webinar for those that are. I think education definitely mitigates risk, no doubt about it, and those risks have been amplified post COVID-19. So we all do agree that education is vital, but we do encourage you to do your due diligence about where you get your education from. Now, the other topic that we're going to talk about, Ben, which has been trending on Property Tribes, is the property sector facing carnage. And obviously quite, shall we say, an emotive title, but we do seem to have a lot of things, a lot of speed bumps heading our way, that almost are coming together a bit like a perfect storm. We've got the final implementation of Section 24 coming into play. We've got the end of furlough coming out. We've got the end of the stamp duty holiday next spring. We've got the government talking a little bit about possible tax changes in the budget, which could affect corporation tax, capital gains tax and inheritance tax. We've obviously got all the issues around gaining possession of a rental property. All of these different things are coming into the mix, and this discussion on Property Tribes is asking, is carnage on the way once all these different things come into play, or do you still see a way forwards?
Well, I think an element of the carnage has already arrived. It's just a question of how bad it gets, I guess. But I certainly look at these things as a long-term view, which I think, depending on how you've chosen to invest, one should do the same. So yeah, it's going to be seat of your pants by the sounds of it, probably for the next 12 months. But we can't look at our investments over a short period. And I think that, if you take a longer term view, I'm hopeful that it's just going to hopefully be a couple of blips or dips in a graph over the course of time. But you're right, Vanessa, there are a number of things that are really focusing on the private rented sector as to whether it is a safe place to do business. I think that the bits that concern me are the extended notice periods and also the length of time it's likely to take to get possession, particularly if you land up with one of these won't pay tenants rather than can't pay. That said, I don't know if people have been as geeky as me over lunchtime, but listening into the parliamentary sessions, there was a lot that has been said around the need to recognise landlords, not to demonise landlords. I'd be a liar if I said that we didn't have a part to play in some of those briefings, but I am heartened with some of the stuff that's coming out. But you're right, there are a number of things coming down the track that are going to cause landlords to question whether their investment and their money is in the right place, and that would, that people will take a different view on that. I'm in it for the longer term, but I accept, that there are some things on the horizon that will make it more difficult for landlords.
No, definitely. And just picking up on what you said about some of the things that have been said that do give a little bit of hope. I have to say that the Master of the Rolls came out with, pro-landlord sentiment, as did Jacob Rees-Mogg, and he made a very good point that the private sector tenants have had a huge amount of government support over the COVID-19 crisis, and indeed, they do have access to LHA and universal credit, which was increased over the crisis. So it was good to hear some senior figures, creating a bit more balance in the sentiment around this issue.
That's right, and I won't give away all of our sources, but members should know that we do a huge amount in terms of briefing MPs and peers to make sure that the landlord's argument is well known. I was very pleased to hear a number of them refer to NRLA quotes and briefings that have been served up, but we do need that to translate into meaningful and tangible benefits for landlords. So I mean, the good thing for me is that ministers have recognised that landlords need access to justice, and the court door has been jarred open with extensive lobbying. As we're going to talk about later, we need to improve the performance times significantly. But we can't do that until the court door is open. The court door is now open, and hopefully it will stay open.
Absolutely, and again, going back to a trending topic on property tribes, Paul Champlina, the founder of Landlord Action, created a post earlier this week saying that one of their cases is scheduled for December 2021. That is over 1 year away. Now, we do want to point out that this was something to do with a guarantor who was not honouring rent arrears, but still, I think it does show how massively clogged up the system is and how long it's going to take to work through the backlog. But again, there is some hope that they are going to prioritise the most serious of cases.
That's right. So, the courts have never been a great place to hear housing disputes, in our view. They took 6 months before COVID. So in this new world, we need to understand a bit more about how things are going to play out in practice. As an association, we are directly involved with the Master of the Rolls working group in terms of some of the new rules that have been put in place. And we will be looking very carefully at things like court times and processing times. If we are talking 2021, I hope that we're not. I know that I'd like to get a bit more information from Paul about that particular case, but that is too long, and we've made the point in the media successfully, particularly over the weekend, that landlords are not property tycoons. They're people like you and me that supplement their meager income and pension with property, and landlords should not be demonized against for that, and landlords do need, in any investment, they do need to know that they can get their investment back within a reasonable time frame. The minister appreciates that. I've spoken with him extensively on this point, and he's reiterated the point in Parliament today. So I'm pleased that the courts are open. I think it's right that the most serious cases get dealt with quicker. So extreme arrears, DV, and antisocial behaviour, that's absolutely right and proper. But that's not an excuse for a huge worsening of performance time. So it's something that the association will be keeping under very, very close review.
Yes, it's interesting that you mentioned the word property tycoon, because it does kind of hark back a little bit to what we were talking about the wealth creation sector, when their marketing is all about how much wealth they've made, and driving prestige cars, filming videos in their flashy £1 million houses, etc. It gives a bad impression for genuine landlords. I've been a landlord for nearly 18 years now, and I do have a reasonable lifestyle, and I live in a decent house, but I'm not driving a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, and I'm not reclining in abject luxury on a beach in the Caribbean if I could anyway. So again, I think there's two very distinct things here. Landlords are not making millions from investing in property. The margins are very, very slim, have become slimmer in recent years, and I think there needs to be much more of a clear distinction between these two different sectors and the messages that they're sending out, because they don't do real landlords any favours at all.
No, they don't. And those newbies that are investing, thinking that they are going to be joining you on the Caribbean beaches, driving around their Bentley, etc., are going to be sorely disappointed. As you rightly say, around 60% of 80% of landlords typically own one or two properties. That's the market that's made up. We know that the margins are slim. Obviously, there are some areas of the sector that generate higher yields. If you can be if you can put up with the faff of HMOs or student properties, yes, you may well get a better yield there, but you'll have a far greater expenditure in terms of health and safety and licensing, which don't get me started on. And any thoughts that this is somehow going to be a significant wealth generator in a short space of time does both a disservice to that investor, but also a disservice to other landlords, because one of the things that we seek to do is to remove some of the rhetorical nonsense that exists around landlords. And I was really pleased to hear several MPs make the case based on NRLA briefings that landlords are not property tycoons. The margins are very slim, and frankly, they're going to get even slimmer if people aren't paying their rent with Section 24, there is far less of that pot to go round. And that's the point we've been making in briefings. I do think landlords have behaved reasonably during this time. The Minister said it himself today in the Commons. But landlords can't carry the can for tenants indefinitely. And that's the problem that we are arising at, which is a political problem. Rees-Mogg was quite right about the extra measures that have been put in place for renters, but I do think that it's inconceivable as furlough tapers that there isn't either an extension or something to replace it on a more targeted basis that helps people stay in their homes. And let's be clear, I'm not calling for landlords to be bailed out here. Actually, what I'm asking for is for tenants to have extra funding to meet their obligations, because rent is the tenant's obligation, and it must be met. And I'm really happy to say to landlords, well, if you can do something, if you can defer this, if you've got broader shoulders to be able to take a little bit of a hit, that's great. But it's not there for the longer term. So we do need extra support for renters so that rent can be paid to their landlord.
Indeed. Well, let's move on now to our main deep dive topic for this edition of the Landlord Lens, and it is indeed once again the ongoing saga of landlords trying to get possession of their properties. You mentioned in the last edition of the Landlord Lens that you had a meeting with Minister Pincher, and I was just wondering, did that meeting actually take place, and if so, was it positive?
Yes, it was. Chris told me, we met on just under 2 weeks ago. He told me that they were not planning to extend the eviction ban, which was good. He was true to his word on that front. We spoke around the need for tenant support to sustain tenancies, because, as I said earlier, I do think the worst is yet to come in terms of the economic impact, and people need support from which tenants and landlords will benefit. There was one specific point, well, a couple of points really. One, I made the point that I felt that 6 months notice periods, whilst far from ideal in the current scenario, we recognise the urgency in which that measure was introduced, but we do see it as an emergency measure. So I've got one look forward to the Renters Reform Bill, which is on the horizon. I don't want them to be thinking that 6 months notice period is the default, because it isn't in our view. He also told me that the renters reform, that I shouldn't assume the Renters Reform Bill would be anywhere near ready to go in April. He is very clear that the Renters Reform Bill should only be brought in when there is, his quote, stable terrain within which to do so. And I think he's right on that. There's lots of calls for Section 21 to go. We've been successful about, Section 21 to go now. We appreciate that it's going in the future, and we understand that. But we've been successful at keeping it for the time being. But what we need to do is to translate that into the Renters Reform Bill so that good landlords have confidence that they can get their property back with reason, and that those notice periods are not excessive and that they are fair and proportionate in the circumstances. And Pincher understands that. So I was pleased to see that. I did make the point to him that I felt landlords moving back into their home needed to be a priority case. His concern was that if the notice period is reduced, that might be a backdoor to unscrupulous landlords abusing the notice period, which I begrudgingly accept. But I have asked him that in the legitimate cases where that's an issue and a landlord has to resort to court to get their property back, that it becomes one of the priority cases that the courts can make rise to the top. And that's something that we are pushing for. We also had a meeting with them. I don't know if there's Welsh landlords on today, but I also spoke with the Welsh Minister, Julie James, yesterday, reinforcing very, very similar points.
Well, that's very interesting, Ben. I think, I do have concerns that if landlords aren't able to gain possession of their properties, that we will, unfortunately, kind of as like collateral damage out of all of these emergency measures, we will see some unscrupulous landlords resorting to Rachman-style eviction tactics. I've already seen on Facebook an advert saying pay us £4,000 and we guarantee your tenant will be out of your property in 2 weeks. Now, yes, I'll pay the tenant £1,000 to leave, and then I'll keep the £3,000 for myself. So we need to be very mindful of people offering non-compliant solutions, shall I say, or illegitimate solutions to this problem, because we'll have more illegal evictions, but there's kind of a little bit of stuff coming through in the media that's starting to happen. And then we'll see scamsters trying to benefit off the back of it, offering an illegitimate or very costly solution.
So I think a couple of things, Vanessa. I think where somebody is promising things that sound too good to be true, they are invariably too good to be true.
Always,
so I would
always.
Indeed. So I would caution against that. I do have some sympathy actually with landlords that find themselves in this position. And it is one of the reasons why the courts need to open and why landlords do need to have recourse, because unfortunately there will be people out there that are so desperate they would take matters into their own hands. One thing I would suggest, if the tenant is engaging, is actually engaging with a professional mediator or conciliator. to see whether a deal might be able to be struck away from the courts. I don't profess what that deal should look like, but sometimes an individual, an independent individual, where you are able to make communication with your tenant, that might be a helpful scenario. However, often in possession cases, a tenant wants to stay and the landlord wants them to go. There isn't too much that can be mediated against. But potentially there might be some offsetting of rental liability. I do think it gives rise to that, but it's far better to do it through a mediator like TDS or PRS, two professional organisations that know their stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, again, stakeholders that are trusted organisations to assist you with this.
Absolutely. Okay, and just quickly, Vanessa, one of the things that we have negotiated with PRS for NRLA members is the first stage of mediation for free. So if you are an NRLA member and think that mediation might be an option, log on to your account, have a look at mediation, and we've got some deals there for both TDS and PRS that may well be of interest.
Fantastic. I think one of the only kind of options that landlords do have with the situation that we find ourselves in at this current time, September 2020, is to seek to sustain tenancies wherever possible. And you at the NRLA have produced a very useful guide called Golden Rules to Sustain Tenancies. So we just wanted to draw attention to that again, there are a lot of good resources out there from trusted sources that will help you through this very, very challenging time.
That's right, and this is one of the documents that we wrote as part of the Master of the Rolls working group, so it's been seen by all of the key people. I don't think there's frankly anything groundbreaking in it, if I'm honest with you. I think if you're a decent landlord, you'll be doing a lot of these things anyway. But the new court rules, you will need to demonstrate that you've met these things and be able to document them. So they are important, and the reason why we have put this out there is, part of our desire to get the courts open. We recognise that the environment that we're in, we haven't been in ever before, and it's new terrain for everybody. So we wanted to make sure that landlords and tenants have key information. If you can avoid giving somebody a notice, that will be a good thing to do. But I appreciate, where you've got bad behaviour and where you've got significant arrears, you will need to follow a process, and it's absolutely right that landlords can do that. And this guide just gives a little bit of context to some things that should be followed before you opt for the nuclear option.
Yeah. Well, as we round this up, I just wanted to highlight the very effective work that the NRLA has been doing on social media with the use of video and case studies, and in particular to draw attention to the story of the NHS nurse who's working every day to fight the COVID-19 pandemic in her job, and she has had to resort to living in an unheated cabin at the bottom of her parents' garden because she can't get possession to get back into her own home, which she needed to do. And there's going to be many, many stories like this, Ben, where people have unique circumstances where they have to stay apart from vulnerable family members, that kind of very niche scenario. But when I saw her story, I felt so sorry for her, what her life must be like, the pressure that she is under every day, and not being able to go home to her own home.
I totally agree, and I think this is where I really advocate the use of case studies, because it's part of our plan to humanise landlords. Yeah. We can give people the platform. We don't necessarily have the stories, and Kelly is one of many stories that we've given airtime to, and I do think it goes some way to point out that landlords are affected by COVID-19 too. And yes, I get there's bad landlords, but there's also bad tenants. And Kelly's story, a few other, Rachel's story was quite a powerful story that we had, where people can't access their homes or they've got significant arrears, and it's given a human context to their problem, rather than just immediately thinking, oh, property tycoon, landlord. Actually, this is causing serious and genuine hardship, not least to an NHS worker who's going over and above to help people. And it's really, really important that we have those stories. So, if there's people listening that have got their stories, you can get in touch with me on Twitter. Or drop us a line, ben@nrla.org.uk. We want to hear your stories and we want to tell them, because it's through those stories that it really they tug at the heartstrings and they give some context. They put a face to the suffering, and we want to tell it. So please get in touch if you are have the misfortune to be affected by COVID-19.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Seeing the videos and reading the case studies, it does put a human face on it. And I think you've been very effective in doing that. And we do urge everybody watching this as well to share those case studies around on the social web. We can all play a part in creating awareness, and community generated campaigns are one of the most effective ways to get our voice heard. I think it's just interesting as well, Ben, that we had a couple of attempts to block the non-recommissioning of the eviction ban, both coming from the House of Lords.
Yeah, that's right. So we had lunchtime, we had an urgent question in Parliament from Tim Farron, Liberal Democrat, but really grandstanding. It was an urgent question, but nothing is going to happen with it. And the minister reinforced all of the views of the NRLA as to why the courts must reopen. What happened this afternoon, well, it's actually happening at the moment, so I'm just checking my phone to see what is going to happen. But essentially, we had two lords that I forget what the exact term is now, but we had, yes, thank you, yes, you're absolutely right. So there was a regret motion by Lord Ponsonby, which is exactly how it sounds. Nothing can happen off the back of it other than people find it regretful that the statutory instrument was brought in. The other one is in relation to Baroness Grenda, where she wanted to annul the civil procedure rules, amendment number 4 on coronavirus. But again, if those things were annulled, actually, like it or not, the government has brought in protection for renters. So, if they did vote for it, any protections that have been brought in would essentially fall away. So again, we don't expect anything to happen on this front, mainly because it would simply remove the measures that have been brought in to help tenants. So I'm not sure what they seek to achieve by this sort of grandstanding, but that's the latest position.
Yeah, well, we don't want this to become the doom and gloom landlord lens. Yes, we are discussing the challenges facing landlords in the private rented sector, and we are creating awareness about them. But, both Property Tribes and the NRLA, we want to also provide support and solutions. And Ben, I do think that we've seen a stabilisation in terms of this anti-landlord sentiment to some degree. The pendulum has very slightly swung back our way. We do have supporters in the government who do understand the very complex nature of the landlord-tenant relationship. So I think hopefully we'll just see more of this going forwards. And of course, that's what you're going to be doing in your various meetings with the the decision makers.
Yeah, I think you're right, Vanessa. I would just sort of, and I'm sure listeners would agree with me that I think the pendulum has got a little way to go, and I think to swing more favourably to landlords. But I think we have to hold ministers to account, and we have to get better at telling our stories. And hopefully, what listeners have seen over the past few weeks is a real concerted effort on that to make sure that we are challenging crap figures that are put out that are misleading, making sure that we are talking up the good work that landlords do, but also humanising landlords. The thing that doesn't help us is the bad landlords that exist out there, and we should all be resolute in our determination to stamp them out.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there, of course. Okay, I'd like to invite Maria, the event host, back in. She's been monitoring the chat for us. We've got 5 minutes for any questions that may have popped up during our discussion. Hello, Maria.
Hello, hi. Yeah, we've had a few questions in, so I'll just kick off straight away because we're running out of time. The first one we've had in is, do you have any idea what the Renters Reform Bill will hold aside from the abolishment of Section 21?
Yes, so I think the Minister spoke clearly and is on the record saying that the possession rights of good landlords will be strengthened. And we are turning our attention to the Renters Reform Bill now that we've jarred the court door open to hold him to that promise. I do think there'll be other things in there. So there's a Queen's Speech commitment for a lifetime deposit, where renters take one deposit from a property to another. I used to work in deposits, but I'm not a massive fan of that concept now. I was before the deposit cap was brought in. But that's a commitment, and that will be coming. So we've got possession, we've got lifetime deposits. We've also got the possibility of landlord redress, which I'm not personally against. For me as a landlord, why should a tenant have greater rights if they rent through a letting agent than a landlord? But the proof is in the eating on that. So there's work that will start, but also we are very keen, not just because of COVID, but more generally, to look at the way that housing disputes are resolved more generally. And we think there's an opportunity in the Renters Reform Bill to have some meaningful change that potentially has mediation, conciliation, and hopefully housing disputes dealt with away from courts. That's certainly what we would like to see. So I think that's enough for now, but I'm sure there'll be other things. I'd actually like the bill published in draft, so we've got a bit more of an idea, but those are the things that we are aware of at the moment.
Okay, and the next question. I am currently fielding financial offers of elite training with a mentor for a specific period for 28k. They have said you have access to a tax advisor and power teams. This viewer is new to the NRLA, but can see there's good training and advice available. It would be good if there was some kind of mentorship program from experienced landlords for newcomers. There's lots of info to review, so some direction and organisational focus points would be one point. As a professional in construction and a member of ICE, personally, I would welcome a better education and qualification-based schemes to the PRS to ensure high standards and remove bogus landlords. What are your views on the pros and cons of this?
So 28k sounds a lot of money to me.
Deposit on a property. Yeah, that's a really good question. They do need to give that some thought, I would say, wouldn't you, Ben? Because that's a lot of money, and to pay that amount of money to be introduced to a tax expert and a mortgage broker when you can go onto a free forum either at the NRLA or Property Tribes and ask the property community for recommendations to reputable advisors, that doesn't seem very good value for money to me.
It doesn't, and I'm just having a little look on our site actually, but we have partnerships with tax advisors that you can access through your membership. As part of your membership of NRLA, you automatically receive tax investigation insurance cover. So if you are subject to an investigation, there's cover there. We have plenty of training, which I won't bore everybody with. I think the point you make around either a mentorship scheme or a more specific membership for new landlords is a very, very good one. It's something that's very much on my radar. I would ask, actually, perhaps you could leave your details or contact me, ben@nrla.org.uk, and I can give you a bit more signposting around what we can do for you. But if I'm honest with you, I would really caution against spending 28k just like that. Not least we're in a recession. I'm sure you could do it for a fraction of the price, but it does depend on what you want to achieve. So drop me a line directly. I would be very worried at somebody just spending that amount of money.
And also, could I just add, Ben, that if anybody's thinking of doing any training, please take advantage of community resources on the social web. Go along to a site like Property Tribes, put that trainer's name or company into our search engine and see what we have about them. Or indeed go on and ask, has anybody had any experiences of being mentored by this individual? And you will get community feedback. And the great thing about that is that it is independent and it's unbiased. It's just people who've been in the sector, have some knowledge of that individual, sharing to answer your question. So it's a very safe place to be in a very large community, because there's a lot of community self-regulation that goes on, and that helps kind of, it's kind of got your back, if I'm honest.
Okay, next question. Where tenants have not paid rent or destroyed a property, can the government consider a rogue tenant database to safeguard landlords and as a deterrent to tenants to always treat property with respect and honour and their rent payment obligations?
I'd like to see that. If I'm honest with you, I don't think we're ever going to see it.
We won't, because it's a massive GDPR issue around that. We did have, what was the closest that came to that was landlord referencing, which was actually a network-based referencing service between landlords, but the tenant's name could never be displayed in a public format. So even that, had to jump through hoops and crawl over hot coals to even get to that kind of scenario. So I cannot either see that there would ever be any rogue tenant database. I mean, the main thing, Ben, goes back to education. The best way never to experience a bad tenant is never to let one into your property in the first place, and that means understanding how to do intense tenant due diligence and referencing. So again, this is where education is so important in mitigating risk.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to get to the point of a tenant register. I understand, I'd like to know where the bad ones are, but in reality, it's not something that we're going to get, and there's no appetite for it. Making sure that we properly vet our tenants, make sure we meet them and get a good feel about them. That's what I do. I actually, rightly or wrongly, I don't reference my tenants. I meet them. Probably don't follow what I do, but I've never had a default yet. So you just get a good feeling about people and what they bring to the table. And often I've found that that's more beneficial than the actual referencing side itself. But obviously referencing and credit check can tell you a whole range of things. So that's the way to go.
Yeah, and you can also look them up on social media and see what sort of lifestyle they have. You might find out that they a drummer in a band and that they're always practicing their drums in the middle of the night, or you might find that they have a 22-foot python or something like that. So there is quite a lot of resources out there. You can put their name into Google and just see what pops up. If you're a landlord looking to do any form of due diligence, Google is most definitely your friend, and always look past the first 2 pages of Google, because results can be manipulated. So it's better to just look to page 3, 4 and 5, just to make sure that you haven't missed anything important.
Should we take one more question, Maria?
Yeah, okay. We've got one here. Currently, lenders are asking for evidence of savings before lending, and are also asking if landlords have taken any holiday payments, whilst government has given these allowances due to COVID. Those that have had to utilise them are being penalised by lenders. Is the NRLA looking into this, and should landlords be penalised for having to apply for a holiday payment and or not have savings?
I think 2 things. So it's something we are very much aware of, but we choose our battles. The courts and the notice periods has been one that we've been working on, but I'm happy to report back on a little bit more that we're doing there. I think it's a more widespread issue, though. It's not just around landlords and investors. It's actually around anybody that has taken a mortgage holiday and is somehow penalised when they go to remortgage or sell or to take out a new mortgage. I didn't understand that that this system would be so discriminatory in that regard, and I think it is something that the association will be doing a little bit more over.
It's interesting, Ben, because when the payment for holidays were first announced, I started a thread on Property Tribes saying why I won't be applying for a payment holiday yet, because actually it was, very early days of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. I hadn't got to a rent point where I was going to find out whether tenants were going to stop paying the rent, and I suspected that this would come back to bite later down the line, and unfortunately I have proven to be correct. And I also warned about taking bounce back loans as well, because one of the stipulations of taking a bounce back loan, and I will quote the British bank conditions, was that your business has to be adversely affected by COVID-19. So by taking a bounce back loan, you were unfortunately signalling that your business model potentially was quite weak. So again, we had threads on Property Tribes recommending not to take a bounce back loan unless you absolutely had to. I will tell you that I am across this issue, and I've been speaking to the British Business Bank, the people that who created the terms and conditions for these government support measures, and basically a lot of the lenders are just looking at it as a case by case basis. So it's not going to be a blanket no, but you may be required to provide further information as to why you felt it necessary to take some of these support measures. But one thing you can always do is pay the bounce back loan back, and then it comes off your records, or it comes off your company balance sheet, and then you're free and clear. So if you did take a bounce back loan just as a contingency method, which or completely understandable, but you didn't have to dip into it, then you could pay it back. But it is unfair of the lenders to say that it wouldn't affect your credit file, because it actually hasn't. But they didn't say that they would then just be looking at it, as part of underwriting criteria.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of disingenuous issue, isn't it? I'm actually talking about I'm talking to UK Finance tomorrow, their chief executive. It's one of the things I'm going to be raising there. But I totally get this issue, and I'll take it away and raise it.
Fantastic. Well, maybe that could be a topic for the next Landlord Lens in October. But for now, we have reached the end of this broadcast. Just like to say thank you very much to everybody who's joined us on the live call. This will be edited this afternoon. It will be on Property Tribes and also on the NRLA social media. So if you want to catch up or share it with a friend or whatever, then there is a recording that you can look at. But any closing words, Ben? Have you got a busy time ahead, I assume?
Oh, filing my nails, you know. No, it's going to be an incredibly busy time. As I say, we're very much focused on understanding how the courts are operating and what that means for landlords, with one eye on the Renters Reform Bill. So there'll be plenty coming down the track, and I look forward to updating members and non-member landlords, should there be any on the call, at our next gathering next month.
And if you are struggling in any way, please do reach out. We would urge you to do that. There's many places you can reach out to. You've got your NRLA helpline with very experienced legal people on the end of that to assist you. You've got community support from the likes of Property Tribes, other forums, Facebook groups, Landlord Zone. There is a lot of support out there, and much of it is free. So if you are struggling, please do try and reach out, and there will be people that can assist you. But for now, we're signing off, and we'll see you next time on the next edition of the Landlord Lens.